Right on. Thank you, everyone, for staying with us. We had a bit of a technical difficulty. We appreciate you being here. We appreciate you tuning in. We apologize on our side. We are in a bandwidth world, and bandwidth is a hot commodity. So we are going to go back to our provocateurs and Marty Chalfie. We are talking about science is a human right. We're having a conversation with our provocateurs and Marty. I think we have 4 minutes back on the clock, and we were talking. Ginger had a question, and she was referencing what was going on in India and science as a human right. So, Ginger, if you could please repeat your question, and then we can have Marty answer.
Amazing. Marty, thank you for the amazing talk. My question is kind of seeing what's going on right now in India with the devastation without the vaccine, what we saw going on in the tribal nations in the US. How do we implement human rights into sciences when so many of these communities are just getting decimated by these things?
So the thing is that everyone has to speak out for this. I think it's the participation of everybody, ensuring that everyone gets these rights that's important. It's when people are being denied this. This document that I said was issued a year ago by the UN, talking about how to implement the right to science, actually implores countries to look at their laws to make sure that they are not biased in particular ways, that people are being neglected. And I think we have to think internationally about how we're all in this together. Every country in the world got this virus. We are all one world in this unfortunate situation. And I think we have to really work hard and advocate for a global response to this.
Absolutely.
comes the sun, here comes the sun. I say it's alright. Little darling, it's been a long, cold, lonely winter. Little darling, it feels like years since it's been here. Here comes the sun. Here comes the sun. I say it's alright. Little darling, the smiles returning to the faces. Little darling, it seems like years since it's been here. Here comes the sun. Here comes the sun. I say it's alright. Sun, 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 here it comes. 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 Little darling, I feel that ice is slowly melting. Little darling, it seems like years since it's been clear. Here comes the sun. Here comes the sun. I say it's alright. Here comes the sun. Here comes the sun. It's alright. It's alright. Don't worry about a thing, 'cause every little thing gonna be alright. Singing, don't worry about a thing, 'cause every little thing gonna be alright. Rise up this morning, smile with the rising sun. Three little birds pitch by my doorstep, singing sweet songs of melodies pure and true, saying, "This is my message to you." Singing, don't worry about a thing, not believe your eyes. If 10 million fireflies lit up the world as I fell asleep, 'cause they fill the open air and leave teardrops everywhere. You'd think me rude, but I would just stand and stare. I'd like to make myself believe that planet Earth turns slowly. It's hard to say that I'd rather stay awake when I'm asleep, 'cause everything is never as it seems. 'Cause I'd get 1,000 hugs from 10,000 lightning bugs as they tried to teach me how to dance. A foxtrot above my head, a sock hop beneath my bed. A disco ball is just hanging by a thread. I'd like to make myself believe that planet Earth turns slowly. It's hard to say that I'd rather stay awake when I'm asleep, 'cause everything is never as it seems. Leave my door open just a crack. Please take me away from here, 'cause I feel like such an insomniac. Please take me away from here. Why do I tire of counting sheep? Please take me away from here, when I'm far too tired to fall asleep. To 10 million fireflies, I'm weird 'cause I hate goodbyes. I got misty eyes as they said farewell, but I'll know where several are if my dreams get real bizarre, 'cause I saved a few and I keep them in a jar. I'd like to make myself believe that planet Earth turns slowly. It's hard to say that I'd rather stay awake when I'm asleep, 'cause everything is never as it seems. I'd like to make myself believe that planet Earth turns slowly. It's hard to say that I'd rather stay awake when I'm asleep, 'cause everything is never as it seems. I'd like to make myself believe that planet Earth turns slowly. It's hard to say that I'd rather stay awake when I'm asleep, because my dreams are bursting at the seams. Dirty old river, must you keep rolling, flowing into the night? People so busy, make me feel dizzy. Taxi lights shine so bright, but I don't need no friend. As long as I gaze on Waterloo sunset, I am in paradise. Every day I look at the world from my window. sunset, I am in paradise. Every day I look at the world from my window.
Thank you all for your patience once again. The wonderful thing about doing a live show is you get to problem solve on the fly. So we're going to go back to our conversation. Can we have our provocateurs back up? And can we have Marty back up as well? We are on Gatwall. Gatwall, you had a question for Marty. Marty and Gatwall, continue.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much, Mari, for the incredible talk. And my name is Gatwal again. I'm from Uganda, and you talk about science as a human right. And my question is, what do we do? What do we need to do, or the world need to do more or less to ensure that there is equal access to education, for the future scientists, including those who are in the refugee camps or those who are in other countries who don't have access to quality education to become future scientists?
Yes, great question. Education.
It is a wonderful thing, and there's so many different aspects to it. One is being able to have access to scientific information, because if you need to be in a very rich country at a very rich university to be able to get access to scientific papers, that really restricts things. So there's been a really big movement in the sciences. Physicists did this 25 years ago, the computer scientists did this, of being able to have their manuscripts available to the entire world, irrespective of anything, before publication. And you have to evaluate them, but they make them available. In the last 5 or so years in the biological sciences, this has really exploded as a way of doing things. So one is having access to scientific information. That's really important. But you're really bringing up a very important thing, and that is equal access to education. And this is particularly challenging for the 68 million people that are displaced, either internally displaced because of conflicts in their own country, or refugees having left one country and gone to another for all sorts of reasons, and being able to provide them with access to this. And it's a massive problem, and it's one that should be addressed, I think, primarily because there is a lot of goodwill by resources to do this. And I know that there's been a lot of attempts to try to do that. But I can also say that my experience in a lab has shown me that if you only have one person with an idea, things don't progress. And if you have multiple perspectives, things progress really rapidly. And very different perspectives. And to me, I've always taken this as the main argument. If you want science to progress, you have to have a diversity of interests and perspectives to do this. And that means bringing everybody in, not restricting any groups at all.
How would you elicit that conversation across the globe, right? Because not everybody speaks the same language. So how would you elicit the conversation for those ideas to go back and forth between people as using science as a human right, as the umbrella?
So, it's difficult. Often people say that I can't shut up, so I think I really like to talk to people about science and this. So I sort of welcome the opportunities to talk with people. I think that it is an obligation of scientists and in the country, in anywhere in the world, to really speak up about what the importance of science is in their communities, as well as other people too. I think we need to have people speaking up. It's not that I'm doing my own little work and I'm in my room and I don't want to be bothered. It's I have to be bothered because this affects everyone. So I think it's a matter of participation.
Thank you so much, Marty. Thank you, Connie. Thank you, Gotwell. Thank you, Ginger. Fantastic start, although bumpy, incredibly informative and really entertaining. I appreciate you all. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. I'm going to bring up our next group for dynamic dialogues. And again, thank you out there for your patience and your time. Thank you for bearing with us in this live broadcast. I want to bring up, as I just said, second group, and we're going to be talking to Gary Hoover, and he's going to be talking about the economics of inequality with our second group of provocateurs, Simon, Zoe, and Joe. So, Hoove, you have 7 minutes on the clock, and your time starts now.
Okay, economic inequality has been on the rise across the globe. However, this isn't a new phenomenon. We've actually seen the rate of inequality accelerate over the last several decades. We've seen an increase in both in-country and between-country inequality. By some estimates, the richest 1% of the world's population has seen their share of global wealth increase from 28% to 33%. In addition, the lowest 75% of the world's population has seen their share of global wealth remain constant at about 10%. Also, we've seen that countries rich in natural resources have seen their poverty rates go up and remain stubbornly high, while other countries have been able to exploit those natural resources and actually widen the wealth gap. Now, some would argue that this inequality is actually a good thing. It shows that innovators and first movers and entrepreneurs are taking risk and engaging in activities to bring new products and services to the market. And since they took all the risk, they should be the ones who should get the lion's share of the benefits. But they go one step further. They say that eventually these new technologies will sift through the entire society and everyone will have access to these new products and services. And then they can use those same products and services to decrease the wealth gap. What these people miss, though, is what happens when inequality violates the social contract. By social contract, I mean when society tells an individual that, hey, if you engage in certain human capital enhancing activities, such as education, that no matter where your starting point is, that you too can move up the economic ladder. So it's a violation of the social contract when that doesn't take place. For instance, when a young Egyptian goes on to get a bachelor's degree, or maybe even a master's degree, but can't find employment other than driving a taxi, well, that's a violation of that social contract. Uh, but let's bring it closer to home. Here we have free and compulsory education. And we say that anyone who doesn't take advantage of these educational opportunities, well, this must be someone who's satisfied with their place on the economic ladder. But what happens when an individual takes advantage of all of the educational opportunities available to him or her, but still finds themselves woefully underprepared when you compare them to their peers? You see, it's a violation of the social contract when the quality of the education that one receives is tied to their zip code. Furthermore, we say that we encourage everyone to engage in entrepreneurial activities, to be innovators. But we also note that to be an innovator, to be an entrepreneur, one needs access to financial markets. But we know that access to credit markets isn't equal, so that even the person with the most ardent and sincere entrepreneurial drive isn't able to succeed because they don't have access. What we end up creating is some type of caste system or even a series of second class citizens. Finally, we know that no economy works well without a well functioning court system. After all, No two individuals are going to enter into an economic contract with each other if they know that there's no court available to adjudicate any differences that might arise later. But what does it say when one part of your society is only familiar with the criminal court system, and another part of your society is only familiar with the civil court system? You see, all of these inequities are violations of the social contract. And let's be clear, these violations aren't happening in a vacuum. People know where they are on the economic ladder. In fact, we have a term for that. We call this social comparison, where people know where they are. In fact, we go even further and we say that this can be described as envy. And this envy can be either benign or malicious. So when envy is benign, individuals lower down on the income distribution, see their peers higher on the income distribution, and they say that they want to emulate them, that they want to engage in the same activities as them so that they can occupy that same spot. However, when it becomes malicious because of violations of the social contract that I just mentioned before, individuals lower down on the income distribution, see their peers higher up on the income distribution, and say the gap is too far. In fact, the gap is artificial. And they will go so far as to say that if there's a system that allows such a gap to exist, that I want to destroy that system. Now, that's not healthy. That's not good for any economy. In addition, we say that individuals see that gap between them and people above, and malicious envy can be when they see that gap and they say, yes, I'll close that gap between me and the person above me, but I'm not going to do it by engaging in human capital enhancing activities, which is going to raise my income. The way I'm going to do it is I'm going to reach up and I'm going to destroy the wealth of those people ahead of me, and therefore that's how I'm going to close that gap. So, look, here we are. We're standing on the knife's edge, and we got a chance to make a decision about how we're going to go forward. We can have sustainable, long run, and reliable economic growth when we appeal to the social contract, or we can continue with this inequity that we have now, which is going to see a destruction of the entire economic system. I'm done, and I still got a second left.
Well done. Absolutely fantastic. Leave it to an economist to end on time. Let's get 7 minutes for our conversation with our provocateurs. Whoever's interested, whoever wants to go first, go first. Just go. Raise a hand. Say something. Do something. Simon, I saw you first. You go first.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Hu, for that terrific talk. So one of the concerns of this whole forum is global sustainability. And I think it's perfectly clear that the increasing degrees of inequity, both within our countries and among countries, are a threat to that. On the other hand, we in the West have been living in privileged societies for a long time. And developing countries want the right to engage in things which will close the equity gap, but it might be threatening to some sort of environmental sustainability. Do you see a conflict there, and how do we resolve that?
Great question.
Well, there is a conflict. However, every sovereign nation has an economic model which can provide for economic growth that isn't destructive. Once again, it goes back to the principle I was talking about of the social contract. When we allow everyone to be innovative and come up with new ideas, how do we know that there isn't a new technology that would allow us to close the wealth gap, but also find sustainability with the climate? We don't know that when we block out people from even entering the discussion.
Yeah, fantastic. Joe, you had a question. Go.
I was going to ask you to put your thoughts on this into a historical context, because it seems like as you were talking, it got me to thinking of the cycles that I feel like we have been through historically in this same kind of cycle of what you've described. And oftentimes people feel like we live in and you spoke of this, a vacuum, and the past doesn't have an effect on how we're living now. So I was just wondering if you could put your thoughts into kind of a historical context as well.
Here's the problem. When there were fewer people on the earth, right, our arrogance, if you want to call that, or these inequities weren't as big and as magnified as they are today. As the world increases and continues to increase in population, our margins for error are decreasing. And as new technologies have come into place and people are able to see these inequalities that exist between nations and between people, they're going to strike out. If we had this same conversation 200 years ago where news spread by, newspaper or word of mouth, that's not the same as today. Over time, technology has allowed me to know exactly what you're doing in real time. So I can see the inequity as it's happening and I will strike out.
Fantastic. Zoe.
I'll jump in. I'll say something that really stuck out to me is when you were talking about how some people see inequality as profitable, because in many ways it is. And to piggyback on what Joe was saying, I was thinking back to history and especially, the invent of the construction of slavery and how we profited off of having second-class citizens and institutionalizing that into society. And so, given that obviously economics in many ways is a study of incentives. How do we incentivize people to strive for equality and to strive for equity in the systems that they're creating? Because right now, I think we can all agree that many of us are just driven by how can we continue to make the most profit possible. And that minimizes the opportunities of others.
Zoe took my question.
It's a very interesting point, but here's what most people miss on that. Some types of inequality aren't actually that bad. As I said before, we want to encourage people to step out front and to be first movers and innovators. But we want to make sure that those opportunities exist for everyone. Because when we're talking about this thing, and what you brought up is this: every time I put myself ahead by holding you back, I make it so that you can't be a consumer of mine. So I want to make a product or come up with a new innovative technology, but what good is it if I can't distribute it, sell it, or gain from it? I can't sell you something if you don't have any money. So if it were up to me, my thing would be I want to make a product that enhances your life so that you then can enhance mine.
How do we rewrite and or recreate the social contract? How do we reimagine the social contract that has the inequality built out of it and equality built into it?
It goes back to what I was saying before. We get rid of the inequality and we add in equality when we realize, as an individual, realize that you being better off actually makes it easier for me to be better off. That's why inequality doesn't work right now. It can't be so one-sided to where only the gains only go to the first movers, right? It has to be for everyone, or eventually, as I said, malicious envy will make sure that it's for no one. I think I saw Simon's hand up again.
Yeah. Simon had a hand up. Joe had a hand up. We have a minute left, so let's get into as many as we can.
All right, let's go.
Go ahead.
Okay, at times you talked about income and at times you talked about wealth. Those are not the same thing. And Piketty talks about capital and labor. What's the relationship between them and where should the leverage point be?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the first part of what you said.
Income
the
and
volume
wealth,
was
two different things. Income and wealth,
income
the two
versus
Income and wealth are absolutely. So wealth is an accumulation and sometimes an inheritance, whereas income is something that can be earned. But for the majority of us, the way that we're going to establish our wealth is through income, right? So both of these work in a fashion that can actually build on each other. Joe, can you get anything in 6 seconds? No.
Yeah, 5 seconds, Joe. Four,
No, we'll be all right.
three.
We'll do it in the breakout room.
Yes, so absolutely. You can ask more questions in the breakout room as well as everyone participate in the chat. Who fascinating conversation. It's something I can talk about all day long. Thank you so much, Simon, Zoe, Joe. Thank you for your incredible introspection and your responses to Who's phenomenal talk. That's one that has to be ongoing. Yeah, that's a talk that
Absolutely.
has to be continued. All right, so you can go to the breakout room, continue that talk. I'm going to bring up the next group. Thank you all very much again. This is so exciting. I don't know how you guys feel, but I love not knowing what they're about to talk about and then learning what they're about to talk about and then just being completely blown away. It's one of my favorite things about being a science hobbyist and a science lover. I would love to bring up Brigitte Baptiste to talk about the sustainability to stability and our wonderful provocateurs, Adam and Klaus. So, Brigitte, hello, how are you? Every time you show up on screen, I am completely taken aback by how fabulous you are. We have
Thank you, Ahmed.
7 minutes on the clock, please, so we can all enjoy your fabulousness as well. Brigitte, your time starts now.
Thank you, Ahmed, and thank you, all of you. Thank you for the invitation. I would like to talk a lot, or a bit about the implication of changes that we have imposed to our planet and the need to redefine our ways of living in it if we wish to survive as a species. But mostly, I would like to share some views about the need to design in a very short term a fair amount of options to face global warming and the destruction of biodiversity altogether without creating, of course, more inequity and social injustice. To begin, I would like to emphasize a view of the world as a new and emerging global ecosystem, a changed world driven by humankind, modified at all levels because of us. Our species is now thriving at global scale thanks to our ingenuity and cultural adaptive capacities, which in turn are all rooted in the diversity of material conditions of the land at each region of the planet and perhaps 10, 20,000 years of history. We may depict that process as a very painful history, plenty of conflicts, war, injustice, or a success story as well within our limited intellectual capacities, of course. We are animals that have started to think a few thousand years ago that has allowed to actually enjoy the being in the planet, not just thinking in another life in the future or perhaps in another dimension, but enjoy the life in this planet. I'm sure, of course, this history is a mix of both. But the awareness of our role in changing the planet's ecology is racing, but at a very slow pace, despite the fact that we are becoming more and more conscious together of the consequences and effects of adding all these local transformations at our world. It is only within the last decades that, less than a century, that we have learned that when piled at larger scales, they create an exponential risk to our own survival. With the Second World War, we started to fear about the globally fatal nuclear conflict, but since then, ideas about risk and security are taking new shape and meanings. Though resource availability, by example, is changing at high speeds, increasing or changing vulnerability for some societies. But also, we are changing the way we refer to those issues. We do not talk just about natural capital, but ecosystem assets and even gifts from the Mother Earth. A recent and compelling narrative based on expansion or rights-based view. There's many global assessments that are telling this hard story. The IPBES, the IPCC, the FAO, all the organisms by the United Nations is helping us to understand what's happening at this global scale. But of course, we are envisioning different pathways, but we don't have one agreement. That's because there's no average nation. We don't live in ecosystems cut by the limits of the different countries. So what we have to do is to realize that we live in a shared world, plenty of diversity, ecological diversity, and cultural diversity. So no single person, community, or nation will be able to adapt isolated and much less to impose solutions to others for challenges of living in this planet. We have framed the idea of ecosystem services as nature's contributions to people. And this has helped us to understand that we rely on a living planet where ecological processes allow us to thrive. But those processes, which mostly are based on microorganisms, pollination, pest control, phosphorus cycling, are becoming more and more visible the last times, and they're quite important for global food and health security, for example. But we need to understand the interconnectedness of things. But if not, we will witness a general collapse of our society. But we have also to understand that we have altered the nature of those ecosystem services, that we have to deal with new management options, combining different levels of control. To become stewards, we have to turn into ecosystem engineers, land artists, and bioethical thinkers at the same time for a general transition to a just and sustainable future. We need to understand that there are some options that will focus on reducing the speed of certain changes and monitoring systemic surprises. That's the consequence of living in a world which is being impacted by many pieces, about changing many pieces of the world at the same time. But others will emphasize innovation to face irreversibility. There are many things that are irreversible. We cannot go back in time. We cannot stop our population is still growing. We are doing efforts to keep a decent number, but it's still a challenge. We cannot stop this growth. Also, we need to stop extinction of the other living forms. That's an imperative. uh, uh, let me insist, just almost to finish, that this new planet we are living in is becoming wilder. But also, our ways of thinking and confronting complexity are becoming more and more creative. We live longer, we have more resources, we are bolder as well as the planet needs us to be. So we have come to understand turbulence more and more. And in physics, it's quite important to understand the way oceans work, the way climate works at this big machine, metabolic machine, the dynamics of the largest forest, and so on. But we are also running one of the most amazing experiments on Earth, which is the building of cities. Cities nowadays are probably the most interesting ecological experiment, and we are trying to see how much we can share with other species, how self-sustainable can we become in those cities. And sometimes we claim that cities are quite separated from nature, quote unquote. But the issue is that this nature is sometimes it's good to have this separation, like to live in a bubble for a little time, because evolution works that way. You need to be isolated for a bit to understand, organize, and then uh, uh, create new options. I love speleology, by example, and caves are a good example for that. So I think that we are facing a lot of changes, and some of them will affect our own bodies, our own existence and organisms. Yeah, we are becoming cyborgs in some a way of telling, and perhaps this is it's more an artistic quest than a planet intervention. COVID has taught us that science and good science, guided by love and care, will help us to do that. So we need to deal with the ugly consequences of global change, but also in the beautiful capacities that we as humanity have built until now. Thank you very much.
Fantastic, beautiful, well said, great talk, incredibly introspective. I love the idea that it's an artistic question as well, being an artist and having something to contribute. So, Adam and Klaus, I know you have a bunch of stuff that you want to ask Brigitte. Please feel free to get started. Just lift a hand. Who wants to start? Don't be shy. All right, Klaus, I see your hand first. We have 7 minutes on the clock for our provocateurs. Klaus, go ahead.
Yes, we have always more questions than answers. I am a physicist, and we see for our planet, the future of our planet, Mother Earth, that these two topics, climate change and biodiversity, they belong together. And very often it's said, okay, the biodiversity, if you increase from 1.5 degree to 2 degrees, there will be the disaster, there will be big changes. But we have to speak about time constants also. We have big changes, and in physics, we know exactly the long-term changes. But you have now changes, the species disappear within 20 years. So then the climate change is very important in the long run. And I think we should focus on climate change because there has so much impact. But then we have these additional factors. We have the agriculture, the land use, and so there's so many different
Yeah,
questions.
yeah,
But for the public, it's not important to focus on the most important things. For me, as a physicist, the increase of the CO2 level in my life, it is increased by 40%. This is really a big distortion. So we are burning accumulated things from millions of years within 100 years. So this is one of the main problems. I think if we focus on this first, then we will solve also a lot of problems with biodiversity. But biodiversity is much more complicated because you have evolution. We have not a fixed system in physics. We can predict what happens in the future, but the biosystem reacts, is living, yes, and
Yes,
we as a
Klaus.
physicist,
yeah,
I
yeah.
think
You're right.
I think that's
please.
beautiful. I think the question is, how do you reconcile with the time horizons, and what should we be looking at? How should we be focusing on? What should we be focusing on first?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, I agree that the climate perhaps is a a simple way to deal with change because we all live and can understand a bit what when it's rainy, when it's excessively hot and humidity, and we are experiencing those changes, and we are facing risks every day. We are having floods and fires and storms and things, and people is becoming scared, and they're facing new risks. But also people is living in tropical forests. We have millions of people that have a perception and love for the difference and variety, and they can handle that variety, perhaps not always in the same direction than biologists and conservation biologists would like to, because it's too complex. But I think that we may face that together by thinking about transitions in agriculture, transitions in food production, transition in water production, and then linked to climate change. But sometimes climate is not, especially for equatorial countries. We don't have seasons. Then, if the seasons change very much or rain arrives later, we are ready for that. We live in a more chaotic system than in other latitudes. So perhaps that may help.
Adam, I saw your hand go up.
Ahmed, thank you. Brigitte, that was a very nice talk. So I'm also a physicist, and I tend to be very, literal and focused on a solution. And, I certainly understand that decades of trying to convince people to cut back, we're not hitting the targets we need to be able to stop what's going on. I'm aware the action we did put us in this situation. Why not focus on efforts to undo those effects by direct action? And what I'm talking about is things like geoengineering, solutions where we actively try to reverse the effect of what we're doing, putting sulfates in the atmosphere, things like that. What's your view of,
Great question.
targeted
Great question.
geoengineering solutions?
Yeah, I've read something about that. I'm not an expert on those type of engineering projects, but I love them. I love science fiction as well, and I think that we need to do those experiments as well. We cannot really avoid doing all the options or facing all the options. But for us, like in many developing countries, the best option is to rebuild our resilience, rebuild the ecological capacities, rebuild the forest, and then at the same time rebuild options for food security and for things that I mentioned before. But yes, I think we need to go on with some experiments, and we'll face and we'll learn how feasible are them or not. And there's plenty of technological innovation that is coming for that purpose.
Can we get a
Yes.
question in from Anne? Yeah.
Yes, that was coming up next.
Yeah,
Thank you, Adam. I appreciate
yeah,
that. Go ahead,
yeah.
Anne, please.
Um, yeah. Thank you so much, Bridget, for those insights. My question really is: Do you think we can get to the? Do you think we can limit the global rise in temperatures to way below 2 degrees Celsius by 2030, or should we just focus our efforts on adaptation and maybe just forget about climate mitigation?
Well,
Fantastic
that
question.
depends on which country are you living in. I think we have different options. If you live in Europe or very well developed countries with industries and research capacities and investments in solutions, then you go for mitigation. And of course, it's also an issue of global justice, environmental justice. Now, we are not, in many countries, we are not contributing too much to global warming. So in Colombia, perhaps as well in Kenya or in many other tropical countries, we would prefer to go for adaptations, because we are very vulnerable. We don't have all that capacity. Our academies are small. Our budget for innovation and research is really, really small, and small, and we have to use it very wisely. So here we are trying to go better after adaptation, but that doesn't mean that we, as growing economically growing country, need to focus a bit on the next generation of industries and energy production. So we are going for solar and wind energies and so on. But still, I and of course, being a biologist and an ecologist, I believe that rebuilding ecological capacities will also at least buy us some time.
Okay.
Perfect. We have 8 seconds,
Yeah,
and Brigitte, if you
you
end
mentioned.
in 8 seconds. I'm sorry, Klaus. We could be talking about this
Yeah.
all day long because it's phenomenal, but
Yeah.
that's why we breakout rooms. We are going to send you guys to these breakout rooms to continue this conversation. Fantastic, provoking, thought-provoking questions, Brigitte. Fabulous as always. Thank you so very much for everything that you're saying. I have a million questions too, and I didn't get any in. And I'm very jealous of all you provocateurs to get to ask Brigitte questions. All right, so I'm gonna send you guys away. Thank you so much again. Have a wonderful day. Check them out in the breakout room where you can continue this conversation about sustainability to stability. I'm going to bring up our final conversation for the evening, and it's technology's promise with Stanley Whittingham. I would love for Stanley Whittingham to join me on the screen, as well as the three provocateurs, Ahmad, great name, Beatty, and David. Thank you for joining us. Can we get 7 minutes on the clock, please? Thank you, 7 minutes. And Stanley, your dialogue starts right now.
Okay, thank you. As the Nobel Committee pointed out, I think some 15 months ago, they said they have laid the foundation for a fossil fuel society. Now, the technologies and the tools are there. We can solve the problem, at least mitigate climate change. And particularly, people talk about climate warming. It's really, I call it climate messing up. We get extremes on both ends. And if we really mess up the climate, woe betide, I would say, London and Northern Europe. People don't remember London's as far north as the Hudson Bay. So if the Gulf Stream should shift, they've got real issues in Europe. So other key thing about the technologies we have, they can help the global warming issue, but they can also improve our resilience to natural disasters. Whether they're hurricanes in New York City or in the south of the States, or whether they're forest fires in Australia or California. If we have good technology in place, we don't rely necessarily on the grid alone, on fossil fuels, we'll be in a better shape. And the bottom line is really renewable energy is viable, it's economically competitive with coal and oil and natural gas. Really the big issue with renewable energy, it is intermittent. So the sun shines when it wants to. The wind only blows at certain times of the day and most predominantly at nighttime. So we have to have storage of some sort. And the predominant storage, certainly season to season, is pumped hydro. But I don't see any more of that happening in North America. No, the environmentalists don't really like us building big ponds. So the only really viable method is batteries of one sort or another. They are ready. They are available now. And probably most of you know, the largest facility in the world started up in Moss Landing, California, about middle of December, 1.2 gigawatt hours of batteries. And they have the okay to go to 6 gigawatt hours. So we have the technology there. We can do it. The real issue are twofold. batteries are not really sustainable today. It takes 60 to 80 kilowatt hours of energy to generate 1 kilowatt hour of a lithium-ion battery. So we have to improve that. And one way of doing that is to have a much more localized supply chain. Right now, if you look at some of the elements like nickel, it may go around the world 2 or 3 times before it gets into your battery, whether it's for an electric vehicle or for grid storage. So we really have to solve that one. And what this means is we need what I would call regional supply chains. In the case of Europe, they're investing billions of dollars to get a supply chain where the raw materials will come from Scandinavia. They'll be processed in Scandinavia using hydro energy, so very clean energy. Those final products will then get shipped to, say, Germany for the auto companies. We have to do the same thing in North America. I emphasize the word North because the United States cannot do it alone. We have to work with Canada and with Mexico. Canada has a lot of minerals we don't have. Canada also has the clean hydropower in Quebec province. And I'm sure they'll be excited to join with us. We have to get the governments to work together to get all their efforts in one place. But no, we have the technical solutions in place, but we now have to get the politicians and public on board. Without the politicians agreeing, without the public saying, yes, we need renewable energy, we need clean energy, and we're not going to invoke NIMBY, like I think the folks on Long Island are trying to do now to stop wind power being put offshore there. We have to put the source of the energy we need, where it's going to be used, wherever practical, and not ship it all around the country. So I think that we have to address that. And really, in the end, it's our job to educate the population and the politicians to get them on board. Also, it's important to say we cannot do this alone. So if you looked at when we got the Nobel Prize, there were 3 of us. I was a chemist, John Goodenough was a physicist, Akira Yoshino was an engineer. It took 3 disciplines working together at different stages of the invention. It also took 3 countries, and I think most people don't realize that I made my inventions in the United States, even though I'm British. John Goodenough is born in Germany, but he's an American, but he made his inventions in England. And Akira Yoshino is Japanese, and he was the engineer working in a company who could bring the bits to fruition. But it also involved heavy investment. In this case, it was Sony. But if we're talking about renewable energy, we're talking about the federal governments of the US and Canada needs to invest so we can compete with the rest of the world. We cannot rely on one country to supply all our batteries and, in fact, all our electric vehicles, which is their goal. So we cannot stay alone. We must cooperate around the world, pull all together in one place. And I say, get all the politicians behind us, use all the resources we have to move forward. And I'm hoping that our present government is going to do that, and without too much interference from the naysayers who don't believe in facts and don't believe in science. We have to believe in our science and move on from there. Thank you.
Amen to that for sure. 7 minutes for our provocateurs. Whoever has a question first, just throw up a hand. I'm going to call right on you. Let's get right into it. 7 minutes on the clock. Provocateurs start now. Who wants to go first for Mr. Stanley Whittingham? Don't everybody jump at once, because I'll go, because I can talk forever.
I will.
Didi, go ahead, please.
Thanks so much, Stan. It's wonderful to be having this conversation. And everything that you shared makes so much sense. I think that because we're talking about something that is so complex and micro, and there isn't a one size fits all solution. Just given the breadth and number of people tuning into this incredible summit, what would be your one takeaway? The essence of your learning over all the decades that you've been working in this area.
Thank you to a similar Anglo-American to me, I guess.
Absolutely.
I think the message is we can do it if we want to do it. As I think Bill Gates said, the pandemic we're in right now, everybody can see the impact of that. Climate change, much longer term. And we really have to recognize we have to do things now. So I think the take-home message I say is we can do it, we should do it, and don't let others get in our way of doing it.
Absolutely. Ahmad.
Yeah, thanks for the speech, Sammy. Amazing. I just had a question coming like more from my context as a youth leader, as in a young person. You've touched upon education, and I was wondering, how could you connect between the kind of transformation you've been pointing out and the youth in general and the world? How could we connect, make the youth work together with such movements around the world, especially with the education field?
I think the young lady from Sweden's told us how to do that. So I think, no, the youth has to speak out. When I came to the United States, it was the middle of what some people would call flower power. It was also the middle of the Vietnam War. And everybody, the youth in college and high schools, were all speaking out. They seem to have gone very quiet in the last 10 years. They're mute on these issues. We have to encourage them to get up and speak out, because old folks will say, well, it's not going to happen in my time, it's not going to affect me. But no, if you're 20 years old, it can affect you, and it could affect you in a big way.
David.
Well, Stanley, that was a very impressive discussion of battery technology, which obviously will play a big role in renewable energies. But there's still a long way to go. I mean, the electricity grid is only part of the problem. Can batteries power airplanes?
Little airplanes. No, I'm pragmatic. We're never going to get yes. They're going to do little hops from island to island, and they're going to be unmanned, I suspect. Whereas you fly, you won't have a pilot with you. It'll be like a big drone, because you don't want to carry that dead weight.
So one question I have, so I'm a theoretical physicist who's very far away from technological innovation, but I'm wondering about the development of technology which isn't directly part of multinational companies' strategies. So the batteries, Tesla played a big role in promoting battery usage and other big companies. But what about something like technological mitigation or geoclimate engineering, which are not part of any company's, multinational corporations' plans at the moment? What can spur technological developments that are outside current big companies' plans?
That's a really good question. I would love to jump on that question as well. How do we incentivize just people to look at technology as advancing us on the earth and not have a profit motive behind it, right? Not have anything to gain from it other than the advancement of us as a species.
Exactly.
My concern, I'm not sure the US is set up to do that. US is set up on the profit motive. Now, my early days, I worked for an oil company called Exxon. They were going to become a big energy company, and they were going to build electric vehicles. They were the largest manufacturer of solar photovoltaic cells in the United States in the 1970s. Most people don't realize that. They also had the world's experts on climate change, and they freely published that work. So I think the big issue is, we invented batteries. The US invented a lot of things, and they all went to Asia to get commercialized. because the US companies couldn't see where they could make a profit.
That's
So
right.
the real question is, how do we move technology ahead without that profit motive there? And can the government step in? I don't know. But if somebody doesn't step in, China's going to own the electric vehicle market, therefore the grid market. And I should say in New York State, it's a British company and a Spanish company that owns more than half the grid. So the foreigners are stepping in, and now somehow we've got to incentivize American companies to do it.
Absolutely. Beatty, Ahmad, any more for Stanley?
Yeah,
Beatty,
so I think I'm just conscious of the time. I think realizing that technology has really fast tracked a lot of what it means to be human without reflecting the true cost or value in the process. How do we start reflecting those real costs going forward and learning from our mistakes in the past?
fantastic question.
Well, I think there's no penalty today in the United States to speak of for generating carbon dioxide. And obviously we have to rectify that and change it. But it's very difficult to estimate what technical progress is going to be. When I started out, we didn't have computers. And students don't realize that. If I show them a slide rule, they don't know what it is. If I show them a log table, they have no idea what it is. So things change rapidly. We can try to predict, but in the end, we never predict as much as things change.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Stanley, for that conversation. Thank you to the provocateurs, Ahmad, Beatty, David. Fantastic talk, fantastic dialogue. I think technology's promise is something that we are all need to hold to account. We all need to make sure that that promise from technology is sustainable for all of us. Thank you guys so very much. Really, really appreciate this conversation. That's it. I'm sending you guys to the chat room to talk, to be able to continue this conversation offline. I want to thank you all so very much for joining us on Dynamic Dialogues. I'd like to end with one of my favorite quotes that I end with in Science Speed Dating, which is a quote from James Baldwin, which is, "If I am in danger, if I am in despair, you are in danger." And the thing that I really love about that quote is what science does. Science takes away the fear of the unknown. Science gives you the ability to evaluate. It gives you the ability to learn. It gives you the ability to investigate. And that takes away the danger. And if that can take away the danger, it could also take away the despair. And that's why I love science. That's why I'm very proud to be here. And that's why I'm so happy to join you and have these conversations with you. My name is Ahmed Best. I'm going to throw it right back to Christiana. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you very much for sticking with us through our technical difficulties. I hope it was worth it. It was worth it for me. Have a beautiful, beautiful summit.
Ahmed, you are the man. Thank you for navigating that. And just when we thought we had this whole virtual thing figured out, clearly we do not. So thank you to all for your patience and totally waiting for us while we got back online. It's even raining here in Southern California. It has not rained here in like 10 years. So it's just going to be one of those days. So I know I promised to make that easy and fun. I hope that happened. It wasn't quite as fast as we hoped it would be, but not to worry. There is a little bit more before we go. So now you're choosing your own adventure. You're going to jump into one of the dynamic dialogues that really caught your attention, and you can hear more. You can ask your own questions. You can be provocative. So go head over to the breakout room if you're not already there. That corresponds to the speaker of your choice. And then you'll have 30 minutes in that room before we end this first session of the day. But before we jump into the breakout rooms, you'll get a chance to rest. You have 2 30-minute activities to choose from. The first one is a little more relaxing. We have a great instructor who will lead you through some light yoga stretches that will also include a soothing sound bath. The second choice is a brain exercise. We've got puzzle master David Kwong, who has created some special challenges for us today. So you can take your pick. After the brain breaks, you'll have some time on your own. You can use that time to wander the halls of the Exploration Hub or hit the networking lounge, where you can connect with your fellow attendees. There are 2 roundtables in there organized by topic, there are chat threads organized around the 3 summit themes, and there are ways you can link up with the other attendees. Oh, and don't forget to look for something called the Video Pledge Booth, where you can record a video and leave it for us here, and please share it on your social channels, expressing your hopes for the future of the planet. Or you can skip all of that and use this extended time to catch up on email, grab something to eat, take a walk, breathe, but come back refreshed and ready to dive back in for session 2, which starts at 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific, and 2100 in Sweden. All right, everybody, off to your breakout rooms, and we will see you in a little bit. Bye.
Petit